sound and groove. Sound and groove. That's sort of what life is all about, really. I mean, certainly there's all the sight, taste, hearing, touch, but sound is significant. I have an opportunity to work with a Parkinson's group, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But let's start with this man. Can we get him started? Sure. This is an iconic drummer. You probably recognize who he is right away. Listen to what he has to say about this old drum set.
Sort of invented, it's called rototoms. So it started here with a little 4-inch tom-tom and got bigger and bigger and bigger. There was like 14 of them till it got here, it was huge. And George Harrison, who went to LA to do some stuff, brought me one back. And we set it up in this room. And what happened was, for me, when we were playing the track, whatever the track was, doesn't matter, you know. Too much to hit, so I had to send it away. This is what I can deal with. 99% of whatever I've done is on 4 drums. This is the bass drum that you play with your foot. This is a hi-hat. That is really a throwback from big band days. This is a crash, because it's short, and this is like the ride. All drummers have one of these. Swing, that, I can be. The bell gives it a lot of life at the end of the song when you're jamming out. It gives it a lift. The tom-toms, of course, are for this sound of depth. I gotta say, these are the shittiest sounding tom-toms. So we're doing our best, the kid's old. And the snare drum comes from way back when people were marching and sometimes they didn't make it back. They used to frighten the opposing side in war. We only play our drums for peace. Beat of all.
This is cool.
Bo Diddley beat.
We just finished hearing this thing.
How great is that? God rest his soul. Bo Diddley got his own beat. I don't have my own beat.
You recognize this?
Yeah.
Oh, so cool, right? Anyway, we're done on that. So that's Ringo and drums. But it's about groove. When you really get inside the whole music thing, the drummer and the bass player really make a band come alive. And to find a great drummer, you really have to search. I mean, it really is the meat and potatoes of what great bands are all about. As I said, I work with Parkinson's patients, and what I've learned through that is how important groove is. You know how you get up in the morning sometimes and you go to the cupboard to get a cup, and you're in the wrong cupboard, and you're just, what am I doing here? And then other mornings, you're in the cupboard, you get the glass, you get the cup, you're pouring coffee, you're on the phone, you're multitasking, it's really easy. There's a groove. You're in a groove. Well, with the Parkinson's group, there's a doctor, Ben Hu, from Calgary, and he's devised a simple little iPod that attaches to the leg of the patient. And basically, if they have that kind of stutter step, with music on, they walk like this. Because it's about groove. But it has to be music that works for them. Like, for example, he likes to use marches, but if it was kind of romantic music from the 1800s where it stops and ebbs and flows, it would be awkward. Or if it was hip hop, for some, it would make them more agitated. But certain kind of music, the stuff they really love, is the stuff that really helps them come alive in terms of their movement. But again, it's all about groove. I'm going to play some stuff today. There's some great stuff out there. There's three things really. There's the sound of great singers, where you can hear the singer and you go, oh my gosh, I know who that is. I either hate him or I like him, but I have some kind of sense of who they are. Then we're going to listen to some riffs, guitar riffs, iconic guitar riffs that make these songs just come alive. And they actually set groove, some of that. And then we'll listen to a few songs, just clips, so we'll sort of drop the needle. So with sound, it's really interesting. You can actually see sound. You don't have to hear it. These are George Martin renditions. Have you seen this book? It's a really cool book. I just saw it's in Calgary now. And it's the complete scores of all the Beatles tunes. So you can see, how they basically arranged the strings. And that was really a big deal for the Beatles. You also can see sound when you look at a record. This is a big deal record. Do you know about this record? So you can look, people who know symphonies, this is a true story, I couldn't believe this is true. People who know their symphonies can just basically look at a record without looking at what the actual title is and look at the grooves in the records and say, Beethoven's Ninth. Oh, Tchaikovsky's Fifth. They can tell because you can see the sound in the grooves. The wider the groove, the louder the sound, right? So again, and vinyl, there's a smell to vinyl. That's cool. That's cool. And everyone remembers their first album. Do you remember the first album?
Awesome.
Michael Tilson Thomas says that he's a great conductor. He says every one of us have 20 or 30 albums that define who we are. That's what he says. Anyway, so I'm going to play a couple things. I want to say about groove too. This guy here, do you know who Victor Wooten is? Yeah, Victor Wooten's an amazing guy. He's a Grammy Award-winning bassist, plays with Bella Fleck. He talks about that being the absolute primary thing in music, or primary thing to think about in this book. By the way, this book I found out is on the reading list, and they use it in theory classes at the Berklee School of Music in Boston. It's a big deal. It says this: you should find the groove before you start playing. It doesn't matter whether you know the song or not. If you need to, let a few measures go by while you figure out what the groove is saying. Once you find the groove, it doesn't matter what note comes out, it will feel right to the listener. People generally feel music before they listen to it anyway. If finding the key is so important, at least find it while you groove. Interesting, eh? That's really interesting, because again, it's like once you get emotion going, that's the irony, we're going to write our SATs right now, or the MATs, whatever you want to write, and you're going to be stationary for 8 hours, and you're going to write this thing, and then we're going to measure whether you get into these schools or not. Isn't that absurd? I mean, so the body moves really well and thinks really. When I can't remember something, I just get up and walk. I mean, that's part of how you can remember things. It being so static doesn't help us. I mean, it's hard to dance this way too, by the way. I was saying earlier, do you know Mr. Gaga? Do you know this guy? Look up Mr. Gaga. The guy is a New York Times calls him the choreographer of the century. This guy is amazing. He's from Israel, and he does these amazing dance steps. But once your body, the choreographer we work with Rev 52, thinks the same way. Everyone wants the steps, but it's not about the steps. It's about getting in your body and feeling the body, where your body is. Let's have some fun with this. I'm going to play a few things. Do I have to push OK here? Yeah. There we are. Now we're going to do some stuff. Okay. So, and I want to go down the page. Is that going to do it for me? Oh, there we are. It's the opposite way. Okay, I got it. All right. I'm going to play this song. On my computer, it's a little bit different. Do you know this? Are you familiar with this song? Can I turn it up? Like, just crank it. Is it on here? Okay, great. You're familiar with that song, right? We'll turn it up and hear it. Listen to the strings and listen to how they're played. Who was the guy that did all the arrangements, and not all of them, but some of them? Who did the arrangement for this song? Do you know? The fifth Beatle? Who was it?
George Martin.
George Martin, right. Listen to the strings. So it's in the wrist. So Paul McCartney goes to George Martin and says, I'd like the strings to be played like this, and I'll give you an example. Now, Sinatra did the same thing. Sinatra would take the words of a song, and he would walk around the house or wherever he was, and just speak the words, and he'd get a sense of how that fly me to the moon, fly me to the moon, fly me to the moon. So he'd get a sense of how that grooved, how it sort of found its way. And then he'd go to Nelson Riddle and say, could you arrange it like this, Nelson? Well, Paul McCartney said, could you use this idea for putting together the arrangement? Did you know that?
Wow.
She never had a shower again. Did you know that? It's true. It's true. She only bathed after that. That's crazy, eh? All right. Now, when the voice happened with microphones, it was a whole new thing. Microphones, obviously amplify sound, but one of the first that really made the microphone work, one of the great singers, the big-time crooner, you'll hear him probably every day now in the next few days with one of the biggest selling albums of all time, and that is who? Bing Crosby. You'll hear Bing Crosby. And with Bing Crosby, there was an interesting thing about his sound. He had this ability to make it seem like he was in the room. So people would listen and watch their radios. Just such an easy delivery, right?
Just like the ones I used to know.
Wide. Who talks like that? Just a wide Christmas. So everything's kind of in his mouth like this. and so when you listen to Bing Crosby, it was like, oh, this guy's so cool. But then another guy came along, and this guy would take a microphone, and he would move the microphone here, and he would move the microphone here, and he would never keep it stationary. And his voice became the voice of radio, of television. And this guy could sell a song. Play, little man. Here we go.
Shoot.
You can tell his voice right away. Can you hear it? This was a big hit for him after, the 40s and the 50s.
Strangers in the night, exchanging glances, wandering in the night. What were the chances we'd be sharing love before the night was through?
That's the other thing with Sinatra. He would take lines and do straight tone. Through and then add vibrato. He did things with his voice that were so unique, and no one ever was doing that so regularly. He could take the speaking voice and make the speaking voice come alive and tell a story that was so in depth and so wonderful to hear. And his audience was just entranced. It wasn't just that Sinatra would sing a song. It felt like he was here. Felt like he was in the room. There was an album he put together, first concept album about 1954, called In the Wee Hours. Who was he dating at the time? Well, no one. Ava Gardner and him were over at this point. So after that was over, that's where the concept album came from. It came from the emotion of that time. And so when you listen to that album, it goes from one song to the next, and it tells a bigger story inside each of the stories. All right, so that's the voice and the microphone. And then there's the guitar riffs. But I'm going to play a couple of these. You tell me who these people are. Who is that? Who's that voice? Yell it out. Ray Charles. Listen. I got a woman. Doesn't sing like, you got this kind of fine woman. You'll notice what's really interesting about sound and groove. If you watch people walk in Memphis, you watch people walk in New York, you watch people walk in LA, and you hear the music, and it's got the groove of the walk. If you listen to the talk of Memphis, they kind of talk like that, and they eat the kind of food they eat in Memphis. They kind of eat it slow. Everything's kind of slow cooked, and they kind of slow have conversations with you, and they talk it up with you. You feel like you're part of the family. And then you listen to their music, and the same music that they play on Beale Street is the same music they play in the churches, is the same music you'll hear all over that town, because it tastes and he sounds like the food they eat, like the walk they walk, like the talk they talk. Music is really connected with all of that in groove as well. Now, who's this? Tom Petty, can you hear it? I mean, it's an iconic song. Okay. That's cool. Who's this? I'm going to drop it here.
Go.
Yeah. This is really interesting about the voice here. The voice in this case, there's a technical ability with voices, but there also now is a human element. In the 50s and the 60s and even in the 70s, if you took voice lessons, people would say, "Oh, you must study with," I was going to say the Bay City Rollers. You must study with the Bay City Rollers because you wear tartan and you sound like you're full of tartan. Well, that's not a compliment. You want to sound like you don't work with anyone. You want to sound like you. You want to sound like you. You don't want anyone to, so it's really interesting as a vocal coach. Sometimes you don't really say that you work with certain artists. They tell you don't say anything. So there's artists I work with, I can't really tell people that I work with them because they don't really want people to know. That's okay. But the voice it's like a physiology. It's like a new physiology. Now it's such that there's a human element. Like this is the perfect voice for that. It's not perfect, and she doesn't want it to be perfect, and nor does the people doing the technology and doing the recording and the engineering. I'm not going to say the voices that were engineered the stink out of, right? But anyone in this room can sound really good after being in a recording studio, and people can tweak their sound. But now we don't want that. We want the voices that are imperfect and they sound like humans. They sound like people. And they emit an emotion that is like hard to take your eyes off of and take your ears away from. Here's another one. Tell me who this is. Who's there? Who's there? Who? He's gonna who's there? Who's there? It's like what a crazy thing. Like who did think? Like if I said, okay, we're gonna take singing lessons or verse exercise. Can you do it? You'd say, I want my money back. But you know, the guy's great, man. He's great. There's a really great singer in New York, great opera singer, and she talked about voices like that, and talked about voices. Who's the guy? She came in through the bathroom window. Who's that? Joe Cocker, right? She said, "Don't take Joe Cocker's voice away. He's great. He's iconic. It's who he is." You knew it was Joe Cocker. That's good. I don't do impressions, but I like.
You're the groove.
I like Joe Cocker. There it is. Who's this? I'm gonna. Oh, here.
Neil Young.
Like, who's that? Like, what a voice that is, right? Again, like, Randy Bachman's like that, Neil Young's like that, Bob Dylan's like that, Petty to some degrees like that. These are voices that are, they're unique. They've got their own kind of place. Now, that's the voices. And again, with those voices, you've got to give room. That's why I showed Ringo. Ringo's a really basic drummer. But he gave the Beatles a voice because he gave them space. Another drummer like that was Mick Fleetwood, from Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
The guy wasn't a really big technical drummer. We don't want to see singers anymore dancing around like, she's a really good singer. She was on The Voice. I'm not going to say her name. She was on The Voice, and she could dance around and twirl in the air with her singing. And she was blonde. And no, I don't mean to say, I just want to try to define it. That has nothing to do with anything. No. But anyway, the story is she's an excellent singer, but sometimes she takes the meaning out of the song, I think, because it dances around too much. And I'm thinking, what are you saying? Like, I just want to hear the song, Anyway, all of that said, here's some things that define. By the way, did you know this about these singers? I'm going to play a few of them. Who's this? Okay, there's something about these singers I'm playing that they have in common. That's one. Here's another one. Who's this? John Lennon. Who's this? Did you get it? Who is it? Yell it out. Lead singer for the Who? Roger Daltrey. Okay. This one. That's Elton John. You know anything common about them?
They're all men.
And they all are men, that's for sure. Yeah? Anything else? They don't like their voices. Isn't that crazy? They don't like their voices. So what they do is they put reverb on them, or they enhance the sound, whatever, because they're so self-critical. And so they're not perfectionists necessarily, but they're people who, they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. It wasn't so brilliant. One time I had a guy come in from Vancouver. We're going to do a recording session. Went to this really great studio in Calgary, and the piano, the pedals busted off it. I said, "What's going on with this?" He said, "Oh, Brian, I'm sorry. Elton John was just here and he broke the damn pedal. And I said, well, we can't even record. So we just had to pay this flight to get the guy back to Vancouver because Elton John was bopping around on the pedal. But he's an amazing artist. I mean, there's groove like that, right? Harry Connick did the same thing in Calgary. And when he came to Calgary, he broke the pedal. And they had to have the Musselwhite came in the intermission and fixed the pedal, and then Harry Connick could do the rest of the concert. That's crazy, right? Yeah, yeah. So now here's the stuff with grooves. I'm going to play some stuff, and you tell me, who is this?
Kinks.
The Kinks, right? You get that little guitar riff. Listen to the groove, though. Great, eh? Who's this? Unbelievable. There's an identity right away. You know what that is. And he sets the groove with the guitar riff, right? Who's this? You're laughing. Do you know who it is? Chuck Berry, you know, the kind of, and again, that kind of groove. What did he call that? The duck walk or something? John Lennon loved it. Oh, he loved it. Yeah, that's right. Who's this guy? This guitar player, who is it? Eric Clapton. We should turn this up. I mean, who would go to a concert this soft? Who's this? This is the king of guitar riffs. I saw these guys. Oh my God. This guy's in the news today. One of his cohorts today. He's in the news. But this guy is the king of guitar riffs. If you're in medicine, this guy's a miracle. Who is it? Just strutting on stage. He's just awesome. He's awesome. Okay, now this is really interesting because this really kind of screwed up the record business. This is from a group that really put Brian Wilson to bed for a while. And I say that not disrespectfully, because there was a huge something going on between this group and this group, right? Yeah. So this was the great album. This was what McCartney said was the best album put out up to that point in rock and roll. He gave his family copies of this album all the time. This is Pet Sounds from the Beach Boys, right? You know what's on this album that's the big song? Wouldn't it be nice? Sloop John B. God Only Knows was a big deal. What's not on this album is a song that took 90 hours to put together. Do you know what that is? Good Vibrations. 90 hours. That was crazy at the time. 90 hours. Layering. So they thought they had something special. Then the Beatles came out with this. And on that, there's stuff like this. See if I can find this. Well, this is earlier. This is... What is this? This isn't on this album, but what is this song? I Feel Fine, okay? But on this album, you know, there's the Sgt. Pepper's thing, and anyway, it was a big deal. So this really took the recording industry to another level, because again, the layers of sound that were put into it. Who is the person that did the crazy thing with sound? And he was a crazy man, but he was brilliant. And he layered like 3 pianos, 3 drum sets, 4 keyboards, Phil Spector, and that was called the Wall of Sound. The Wall of Sound was, well, Lennon used him a lot, actually. He was a big fan of Phil Spector. None of the other Beatles could get their heads around why they were working with this guy. But they would layer sounds and layer choirs into the sound. And it was massive. And this guy was possessed. He was the guy that was the musician. The musicians didn't matter, nor did the sound engineers. He was the guy. It was him working the board. Do you remember the T10cc sound, that really cool board? Big boys don't cry, big boys don't cry, remember that? That board is in Calgary. And yeah, the 10cc board. And again, they worked that as an instrument. That was the coolest thing. That was a whole different kind of head space. Let me play a couple more riffs. How are we doing with time? We're going over. I'm going to go fast. Okay, let's do... well, here's the Sgt. Pepper's, right? This is the big sound that everyone thought was so special. So again, all these crazy sounds that were morphed together. Wow! And look at the guitar. Anyway, you get the idea. That was a big deal song too. So anything Elvis did, we know about Elvis from here on up if you were watching television in the early 60s. Right? But if you were from Memphis, you watched him from here down. You were watching him from the stage, and he was amazing. Again, the groove and the movement was so affiliated with the sound. It was so much part of that Memphis sound. So there's all of that. And then there's so many guitar riffs I could show you. There's so many great ones. Do you know the Guns N' Roses Slash thing? You know, Sweet Child of Mine? Oh, and this one. I gotta play this one because I don't listen to these guys much. But I mean, even if you don't listen to these guys much, you know this guitar lick. Yell it out when you know. It's Black Sabbath. Look, who is the guitar player? Here's the big guitar lick. Everyone can airband this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. But it's this next part. I think that, yeah. It's so great, eh? Oh, yeah. Ha ha! Man, that is good stuff. I didn't really understand much about it, and then I watched a whole thing on Black Sabbath. I mean, brilliant stuff. They were really pushing the envelope. So, as I started with, we talked a little bit about these albums and how important they were and how important the 45 was. You know, there's an A side and a B side, you know, and again, you can see the sound on these things, and it was touching them, and then it was also like reading the liner notes of these things. That was really all a part of it. But just to review, in life, you just have to watch an individual. Watch how they walk. Listen to how they talk. Watch what they wear and how they wear it, and whether they wear it like it's part of them or they're wearing it like they're a grade 8 at a graduation dance. That would be the
Big
worst.
City Rollers.
The big city. They were amazing too. They were there, right? Yeah, that's cool. That's great, man. That's great. So all of that said, sound and groove is so much a part of our everyday, and it's not any further than what we see or what we hear. I mean, even as a person pours their coffee and drinks their coffee, or drinks their whatever they drink, you know, you get a sense of who they are and how they flavor their life.